So we were coming to the end of the development of Beneath the Steel Sky and wanted to go straight on to a new game. So I had to come up with some ideas. And I pitched Virgin the idea of an Egyptian game, because I love Egyptian history. I love the idea of a game based on hieroglyphs. And one day I will write, if somebody doesn't steal this idea, I will write a game based on hieroglyphs and learning how to communicate through hieroglyphs. And Sean said that he wanted to meet, and he invited Noreen and I down to dinner. And it was a really nice restaurant on the King's Road, and Sean has never been afraid of buying good wine. So we had a couple of bottles of extremely good wine, and then I pointed out that the point of the dinner was that we were meant to be pitching ideas. So Sean looked at the Egyptian game. He said, "No, Egyptian games don't sell." And that was it. Didn't even open the cover.
That was a no-no from the very start, frankly. But we started discussing ideas, and we had dinner one night on the King's Road after a few kind of glasses of wine, and I just happened to start talking to Charles and Noreen about just a book I'd read, which was from Umberto Eco, called Foucault's Pendulum, and about this bizarre kind of group of people called the Knights Templar.
And Charles said, "Who?" And I had heard of the Knights Templars because I was brought up in a little town in the southwest of Ireland, in County Limerick, and we had the ruins of a Knights Templar castle in the town where I grew up.
And I kind of looked into a little bit of the history of them after that, and just suggested to Charles the whole kind of conspiracy theory surrounding them, and the whole connections with the kind of the Masons, and that's what it could really make a quite an interesting storyline now.
We had total confidence in his commercial ability to know what would sell and what wouldn't sell. Sean wanted the Knights Templar to be anti-heroes. We wanted to turn the thing slightly, so I wanted to use it as a historical basis. But that's really where Broken Sword as a whole had its genesis.
We'd had 2 successful games, both at the top of the charts, rave reviews. We were building the Revolution brand, and that was important for us. We wanted a reputation within the sector for who we were, and that we wanted to be taken seriously. And we were now thinking about making possibly a bigger game. The technology was continuing to move on, and we would be able to be more ambitious about what we wanted to produce. And I think Virgin recognised this. And in fact, in some ways, they were probably more ambitious for us than we could have imagined ourselves.
Yeah, we looked at the companies like LucasArts and Sierra and looked at their success in the adventure genre. And they were very global, very high production values, a lot of humour, particularly in the LucasArts titles. Phenomenal amount of humour there. Monkey Island, for instance. And we felt there's a lot of talent, I think, in the UK that we could produce games that we could launch on a global basis. So we're certainly looking for that, absolutely.
And Tim Cheney and Sean Brennan sat us down and said, "Look, we'd really like to sort of build on this relationship that we have with you. We would like to sign a multi-product deal." Now that was a gift, because only the best of the best were being offered multi-product deals in those days. We were a tiny company, so we were so pleased with that.
Sean and Virgin had asked us to up the production value, so we expanded the team, and we opened up a little office in York. And we expanded because we were much more ambitious in terms of all of the production values.
I think the ambition went through the roof. I think after Steel Sky and its success, the feeling was at Virgin and at Revolution that we could aim a lot higher.
We'd always felt that British developers produced the most playable games in the world. But they didn't always work elsewhere in the world, because I think we were trying to compete with the American market, developers in America. And just like there's an analogy, I suppose, with Hollywood there compared to independent, British film studios, the production values are way higher. And that does resonate with people, quite frankly. So, whatever that might be, they look better, they sound better. The amount of budget they spent on voiceover, on music was probably more than we spent on entire games. So we had to kind of up the ante, so to speak, at that stage. And that's something we encouraged Charles to do.
That was the first game that we really seriously thought about a rich story content that would unfold as the gamer plays the game.
Broken Sword originates in many ways from when I first went to Paris. My mother took me when I was probably 8 or 9, so that would have been about 1969, 1970. And France, and Paris in particular, had so much confidence. London was still grim and poor and sooty. Everything was black and grey and dark. And Paris was vibrant and they were rich, considerably richer than us, and our food was bland and theirs was special, and everybody smoked Gitan and Gauloise and they smelled of beautiful perfumes, and it was so different. In many ways, The Broken Sword, Paris, is the depiction of what it was like and what I remember it to be. When I write stories and come up with locations and characters, if I'm not excited by them, I can't imagine why anybody else would be. And the characters in particular, I try and think of characters that I've known, that I've met. And a lot of Broken Sword characters come from that. When I was researching, Noreen and I went to meet a friend who lived in Paris. We were driving to the airport in a taxi, and there was a really bad traffic jam. It was around one of those typical little Parisian squares. And there was a gendarme trying to direct the traffic. And people started hooting, and then everybody started hooting because it was just chaos. And he looked around, got off his stand and went into the little cafe and ordered himself a glass of wine. And very quickly the traffic cleared and off we went. So he's gone into Broken Sword as the guy trying to keep order with the clown and above the sewer.
I could direct the traffic. The most dangerous, the east side of Rome. Or I can sit here and enjoy the sun, the architecture, and the Sauvignon.
In Broken Sword, what I really wanted was the juxtaposition between two characters that would both have an affectionate relationship, but would also create conflict, and through the conflict you could tell the story. So came up with the idea of Nico as a sassy French woman. What was the opposite of that? I felt the opposite was an American George who was laid back, and they had a very different outlook on life, but they were going to solve the puzzles together.
Bonjour, Kula.
Oh, hi. It's George Stobart, the American at the cafe.
Ah, oui.
You said to call if I could help.
Have you any news for me?
You bet. I met a witness who spoke to the clown. And I know where the killer gets his suits.
No kidding. Hey, I'm impressed.
You are? Well, it wasn't easy.
Look, why don't you come here to my apartment?
We can tell the story in a way that's both affectionate but also creates this sort of sexual tension.
I went to drama school with a young lady named Hazel Ellerby, who was the first Nico in Broken Sword 1. And she said they were looking for an American, and she'd given them my name. And she was asked to contact me and see if I'd be interested, and I said yes. And I met the director. He offered me the job then and there. George is a great guy. I mean, he's very funny. He's sort of the kind of guy that everybody wants to be like. You know, he gets in trouble and he's very funny about it, and it's no big deal. And he's got the beautiful girlfriend, and he's the guy everybody wants to be. I did have a script in front of me all the time. And Charles also brought up the drawings. There was a lot of artwork that had been completed or was in process of being completed. So there was at least I would get an idea of what it looked like, which was a huge help.
Internally, we did a number of the layouts, and they were fine. But I'd read in Edge magazine that there was a college called Ballyfermot that was producing the most amazing animators. And we needed animators, so I decided to go and visit them. And I met the principal and a couple of the lecturers. And one of the lecturers was a guy called Owen Cahill. And Owen looked at our layouts, and he sort of giggled, and he said, "This is just not good enough. This is not good enough." And he just really, really understood exactly how we could get the most emotionally out of the game from the layouts. And he was a really inspirational part of all that.
What he could do with a pencil was unbelievable. You know, sort of like he was just so talented, and he put a lot of work into defining the look and the style. You know, with the pencil drawings. I mean, if you look at that very first screen, that very first game screen, you know, the outside of the cafe, the feeling of that. And you've got quite a low angle on the floor there, you know, sort of like, and it goes off into the distance. But then you go to the castle in Ireland, where you're sort of looking a bit more down, so the angle on the floor is much greater. But the same sprite still works on both of those screens, regardless of the floor angle. And it was it was Owen kind of like saying, let's try and push this.
You'd say, Owen, we can't do this. I'm sorry, you can't do it this way. And he'd say, why not? And if you tried to fob him off, he'd keep going. And the point is that a lot of the things that we thought we couldn't do, we could actually do. There was a Ferrari scene that people may remember. And at the beginning, we have a Ferrari revving, and then it comes across. He's changing the perspective so enormously. And we actually then had the problem of matching the Ferrari, which is actually 3D. And it became really, really difficult to try and work out exactly what the camera was doing.
That was a big moment. We could see the backgrounds were just amazing. We were using colorists, and we were also using character artists.
We also had the real privilege to work with some very experienced cartoon contractors. There was a company called Red Rover that worked with Disney, and they produced the intro. It was actually storyboarded by Owen and his daughter Celine. And so a lot of that came from them, but we actually outsourced the production of it.
The Red Rover guys were just, their characters were stunning. You describe what you want in a character, and lo and behold, there it was on the page. But everything was done by hand initially, and then it was scanned into the computer. But those were the moments when we felt, this is different, this is new, and it's cutting edge.
With regard to the goat puzzle, this is a mea culpa. I take full responsibility for it. The reason that I wanted to put a really hard puzzle in was because there were two types of players. Ones that rushed through, they understood the grammar really well, they'd rush through a game and then complain it was too short. And then there was the rest who played games like normal people. And what I wanted to do was stop those really, really fast people in their tracks.
The animal fixed on me with an evil glare. Behind the malice and resentment, there was a cool intelligence.
How you doing, boy?
So the goat puzzle was intended to be really, really difficult. And those people did. They were stopped in their tracks, and then after an hour or two, they moved forward. The obvious byproduct of that is that the rest of the world found it absolutely impossible. And it was well before the internet, of course. So if you didn't know how to solve it, there was actually very little way of moving forward until the solution got printed in a magazine at some point later. So one of the things that I'm quite proud of in a way and slightly ashamed of in another is that actually the goat puzzle is infamous as one of the hardest video game puzzles that it exists. It's actually got its own Wikipedia page. I'm very grateful to have set that up and maintained it. But yes, that's one of the things that people who played the original Broken Sword really remember, and I'm afraid I must take the credit or the blame, whichever way you see, for that particular puzzle. As well as Owen, I wanted really, really high quality music. And about 3 or 4 years earlier, I'd actually played cricket on a regular basis, one of my team, with a young composer called Barrington Phelan. He was writing the music for Inspector Morse. He'd written the music for a number of films. He was extremely successful. And like Dave for Beneath the Steel Sky, he just loved the idea of exploring this medium.
And actually, I believe I just instantly said I'd love to. It was a very simple reason that I thought at the time that most music for all computer games and video games was pretty naff, and unnecessarily so. why was it always done on, bad synthesizers? And I thought we should approach the music very, very differently.
He had just married, or was about to marry, his wife Heather, and Heather loved adventure games. And very quickly we worked out that it was perfect as a partnership, because she would play the game, and she would record them. She would then define which cues she thought that he ought to do. He would look at the videos and he'd compose to those cues. She would then organise it with us, define exactly when it happened. We would code it and send it back.
She is a great games player, and we'd be getting, the earliest versions of the game, and Heather would play it and play it and play it. And essentially she became my director.
Because she had such a passion for the games, she'd play them again and again and again. And one of the reasons that I think the music in those Broken Sword games worked so well was the passion that both Barry and Heather had for getting the music absolutely right in the game.
I set out with Charles to make the whole score actually interactive, to make it, and first and foremost, to make it consistent with the same quality as a real feature film score. And that meant a very fundamental shift from what was then the standard industry music score for a game. And that was not to have it on NAF synthesizers in loops, but to have a real recorded orchestra, real instruments playing real music. And I discussed with Charles, was there enough sampling space? And there was. The first game was for PCs, and they had sufficient memory.
He wanted to be part of the games industry. He wanted to write interactive music, and everything he did, he took it moment by moment. One example was the dustbin with the cat.
I guess the clown had an escape over the rooftops.
When you come into that alleyway, his music, it was like film music.
I tried to lift the cover with my fingers, but couldn't gain any leverage.
You know something's going to happen. You're waiting for something to happen, but you're not quite sure what it's going to be. And then you get this moment when the cat squeals and jumps out. If you go back into that alleyway again in the game, he had slightly refined or changed the music, so you get something new.
And then you go in a third time and it changes again. So what Barry was trying to do was create, through linear music, an interactivity that had never really been seen in games before.
When you see all these talented people come together, and you can see that nobody else is quite doing anything that's in the same level of quality. And then kind of you layer on top of that the fact that people like Red Rover were visualising some great stuff with the characters and the cutscenes, and the fact that we had Steve Oates, who is the best sprite artist I think I've ever met, and people like this, and you realise that yes, it is coming together well.
And a lot of people talk about the opening to Broken Sword when we see the view from the Crow's Eye. We see the view over Paris from Notre Dame. We have Barrington Phelan's music, we have Rolf Saxon as George, and we have Owen's beautiful layouts, and the three came together in this extraordinary trinity.
Paris in the fall, the last months of the year and the end of the millennium. The city holds many memories for me, of cafes, of music, of love, and of death.
The thing about an adventure game is that it only really comes together when all the components are there. So without the music, with ropey animation, without coloured backgrounds. There's no sense of actually the game feeling good. But when Broken Sword came together, people began to realise that actually they had the potential for a big hit on their hands.
At the time, the specialist press were of immense importance in the industry. They really drove the business. Until it all pulled together, it was very, very hard to tell how successful it would be.
As we neared the end of Broken Sword 1, Virgin realised that they had a possible hit on their hands. And it was a real shocker for us and for them when the first review came through, and it was nothing like what we were expecting.
Because there was about a month or 6 weeks delay between a game being reviewed by a magazine and it actually appearing on the shelves, what often happened is a magazine would be given the exclusive, but they'd then be given code that wasn't quite finished, it was a month off, and asked to review it, but very much taking into account that there were bugs that were going to be fixed.
We'd sent out a version of the game that wasn't completely finished, that had a lot of bugs in it. They picked up on this very, very, I think, over aggressively, I have to say.
In fact, they criticised it because of the bugs that were obviously going to be fixed.
It did result in a huge falling out between us and the publisher, Dennis Publishing, I seem to recall at the time.
And that was absolutely devastating, because we had this game that we had full confidence was going to get great reviews, and it got slammed.
I'd like to say that we were very responsible as a publisher, that we didn't behave in a very puerile way. We didn't try to be vindictive by withdrawing all advertising from them and their sister publications at the time. But unfortunately, we did.
We were devastated. But I think we rescued the day, or at least Virgin did, because, subsequent reviews when the game released, it was received very favourably.
And then a whole deluge of new reviews came. So Edge gave it 9 out of 10. It got generally between 90 and 100%. Absolutely in contrast to this first review, and it was great, and it was a huge hit, and we were delighted. And then that gave Virgin the confidence to really push it with some fantastic advertising, a cinema advert even.
Yes! With the bomb! A bomb!
Broken Sword, the game, out now on PC, CD-ROM.
It was Game of the Year for a number of publications in a number of countries, frankly. I'm not too sure. Can't quite recall how many awards it won in the end, but it was very substantial. The story resonated with people. They loved the production values, the characters, and and the whole concept, I think, really, really came across very, very well.
I think we all knew that we had a good game. I don't think we realised possibly how good it was.
There was literally one review after another saying, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. It was just amazing. You couldn't make it up. You couldn't dream it up. It was really, really something else. The other games were successful and well received, but Broken Sword was that big league. It was everything changed. I think when we saw those reviews, we knew we'd done something. Something that was going to be a classic.
Oh, I was thrilled, and all I could think was, come on, bring on the next one. Let's do it. And let's see how far we can go with that. And let's keep pushing the boundaries,
I'd like to talk to you about a menace, threatening humanity. It's happening right here, in our very homes, and corrupting the lives of our loved ones. Yes, friends, I'm talking about this. It may look like a harmless bagel toaster, but inside is a deadly donut.
The PlayStation had released in 1996, which was a year before Broken Sword, so we were well aware of its success. Sony had done an amazing job making it appeal to young people, and the sales were phenomenal. And the development was run by a fellow called Phil Harrison, who I'd known at Activision. He'd done some work for me, and he'd actually got in contact with us a couple of years earlier, saying that PSX was this new console, that he was working for Sony, and invited us. And a load of British developers came, and we were really excited because most of us had never met anybody from Nintendo or Sega, certainly never been contacted by them. So the idea of a console manufacturer actually getting in touch with us was amazing.
We approached Virgin. I think they laughed, actually. They thought, no way, it's just not possible. It just won't look right.
And there wasn't enormous enthusiasm. From Virgin's perspective, there was no point in even considering it because it wasn't going to work.
It's never going to work. I said it was never going to work. This type of game does not work on consoles. The user interface, it will not work with the control pad. There's no way that will work.
Sony were a little less reticent, not enormously enthusiastic. And eventually they decided that they would commission it.
PlayStation consumers don't want this sort of game. They want action games, they want football games, they want shooters, that's what they want. They don't want a story-based adventure game like this. Point-and-click adventure game on a console. Absolutely no way was that ever going to work. And that was unequivocal. We were all unequivocal about this. There's no bloody way that thing is going to work. Never.
So we asked them if we could license it to Sony, and they gave us their blessing, and indeed we did.
The official PlayStation magazine, which at that time had a circulation of 600,000, gave it 9 out of 10, massive coverage. They cover mounted it, and because of the extensive reviews, it sold really well. It sold about 500,000 copies, which for that time was just phenomenal.
It looked amazing, much better than it had on any of the other formats.
You know, I'm not saying we were left with egg on our face or anything like that, because we just, and just to mix my metaphors a little bit, we just brushed it under the carpet and forgot about it, really. But it was, in hindsight now is a wonderful thing, isn't it, really? Shame we didn't have some hindsight at the time, really.
So after the success of Broken Sword 1 on PC and then on PlayStation, we were a bit surprised when Virgin said that they didn't want to commission a Broken Sword 2. It felt like a no-brainer.
It was difficult for us because we were at Virgin going through a very difficult stage there from a corporate perspective, though there were elements in the company that didn't want to commission the second game. So certain elements, certainly in kind of North America and elsewhere, I thought, well, is this really what we want to be doing? Which we thought was crazy. And, in the end, we got our way and we signed the game because it was, the first one was a critical success and it was a commercial success. We made money out of it. And, we were trying to build it. We wanted to build the franchise over a longer period of time. So in the end, we actually, of course, we did publish it, but it wasn't, there was some dissent within the company as to whether they wanted to do that, which was, kind of crazy now looking back, really. But I guess that was politics at the time there.
So we finally got it commissioned at the beginning of 1997, but it was commissioned on the basis that we had to finish it that year.
That was quite a challenge, but we thought, yeah, we'll go for that.
We knew we could do it because we'd done it before, so it was an extension of that. But we still had to kind of like hold it to a high level of standard.
Broken Sword 2 had a really tight schedule. They basically gave us a year to design the game and finish it, which, considering that was like half the time of Broken Sword 1, it seemed a bit ambitious.
Some people feel that Broken Sword 2 is a little bit rushed, and that's the reason. But I think as a game it works really well. I'm very proud of it. But it was shorter than Broken Sword 1, and we really had to cut a few corners.
It became apparent that Nico needed to be really upgraded. She had to be a much more prominent character than just the sidekick. Much more interesting. It was better for all kinds of reasons. And so a lot of the onus was taken off George. Usually it's the woman who gets tied up or needs rescuing, and the man gallantly jumps in and does the rescuing. The other way around this time. George was in trouble and Nico jumped in.
I'll tell you, the really interesting thing about Broken Sword 2 is the first and only and first and last game that Revolution have ever done where it's finished on time. I remember it was meant to finish on like a Thursday afternoon, and it did finish on Thursday afternoon. It was amazing.
Broken Sword 2 launched on PlayStation, and again, it got great reviews. 9 out of 10 from the official PlayStation magazine. 9 out of 10 pretty much across the board. It went on to sell 650,000 units, which was massive for the time. One of the things I feel particularly proud of is that when the official PlayStation magazine launched a readers poll, Broken Sword 2 came in at number 5, ahead of Resident Evil, ahead of massive games. Broken Sword 1 came in at about, 10, 11, I think. So we had 2 games in the top 12 of the best PlayStation games ever. So critically it was a huge success. Commercially it was a huge success.
What do you remember ultimately in a game? Do you remember when you've killed a certain number of enemies or something along those lines, or do you remember the storyline, and going through a story with characters, solving problems with these characters, some of which perhaps a little bit kind of esoteric and a little bit difficult perhaps to get through, but doing that, and the sense of satisfaction of solving the puzzles and developing the storyline and moving through the whole story with those characters, and that's something that people remember, I think, and that's again, that's why I think the longevity, I think, of the Broken Sword brand and of the storyline is still there.